Stephen Interviews You, discussing topics that matter to you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, smash the like button, and feel free to share it with others so that they can see it too. And if you're new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can get updates on what I'm doing for this channel. Thank you all so much for your support. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Stephen Interviews You. This is episode number 42. And this is a show where I get to interview various people from the college sports industry. And I am joined now by a very special guest.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Eli Gardner. I am the head football coach at Stonehill College in Easton, Massachusetts. I am going on my 11th year as the head football coach and my 19th year overall here at Stonehill.
Nice to have you on the show, Eli. So let's just get right to it. When it comes to getting into the game of football, what basically inspired you to get into sports, into football in general? What was your backstory like? Not just getting coaching, but just get involved in any way.
Yeah, so I grew up in New Jersey, small town, went to the same high school that my dad went to. Was a three-sport athlete growing up, played baseball, football, basketball. My dad had played college football at Ursinus College in Philadelphia. So it was obviously in my background. My mom was a really good athlete. Growing up playing sports, you get to high school and, I went to a really great, small kind of public school, and you kind of played with the same guys your whole life, right? In every sport growing up. I was fortunate enough after high school to be able to play college football. I knew that I wanted to keep playing the game. I loved it. And I knew, I wanted to be somewhat close to home, and I knew I wanted to be a sports management major in college for whatever reason at that time. So, my dad and I kind of drew a 3.5 hour radius around our home in New Jersey. And we started exploring, colleges and universities that I could play the game at and also get a degree at. Inevitably we settled on Western New England College. It's now Western New England University in Springfield, Mass. And I had a really awesome experience there, both on and off the field. I was able to be a 4-year contributor, a 3-year starter, a team captain my senior year. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, when my senior season was over. I knew I loved sports. I knew I wanted to be involved in some form or fashion. That spring of my senior year, our head coach at the time, Keith Emery, who I had the opportunity to play 3 years for, said, look, we have an opening here on staff if you want to volunteer for the spring and put something on your resume. So I did that. And I loved it. I fell in love with it, working with the guys. And, obviously it was a little bit of a challenge for me getting right into coaching at my alma mater, as, being a teammate, with a lot of those guys for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And then, then kind of shifting roles and trying to be a coach. But it was a great experience for me. It's really where I got the itch and fell in love with the coaching piece of it. So I got to spend a whole year at my alma mater. And then, I've been at Stonehill ever since. I applied for a job here after that first year. And I've been really fortunate, after that first year at Western New England, to go through almost every other phase in my coaching career here at Stonehill, going from a position coach to a coordinator, to associate head coach. And then obviously, to now being the head coach. And I've been really fortunate, to be at one place for a long period of time, as you, and I'm sure, the viewers know that that's a rarity in this profession. So I've been able to plant my roots and build my own family, but also be a part of building something here at Stonehill that's been really exciting. When I first got here, we were a pretty mediocre Division II program, and we built that up. And then obviously now kind of making this transition to Division I and FCS football has been really exciting. And you kind of feel like, you're a part of something that's a little bit bigger than yourself. And I still think we do things, quote unquote, the right way here at Stonehill, where we're very academic centric, but also now to compete at the Division I level, like we feel like we have a great opportunity for student athletes to try to get the best of both. So I've been really fortunate, just kind of, being in the right place at the right time, and obviously you got to make the most of your opportunities. So that's what led me here today.
Yeah. So in 2019, I read your profile on the Stonehill website. In 2019, you were named the D2Football.com Northeast 10 Conference Coach of the Year. Take me through that. Take me through the entire 2019 season. What were the challenging points of the 2019 season, but what were also the very rewarding parts of the season as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, at that time, I took over, I believe, in 2015, right? And I was a coordinator for a long time under the former head coach Robert Talley. So I was able to, you know, learn a lot on the job of what works at Stonehill, what doesn't work, what it takes to be successful at this level. Um, and then obviously taking over the program at that point in 2015 the 2016 season, that gave me an opportunity to then kind of put more of my stamp on things, right? And to have my fingerprints not only on the defensive side of the ball where I was kind of limited to up until that point, but becoming a head coach, you want the team to take on your identity. And I think the awesome thing about that 2019 season was that was the first year then for me as a head coach where all four recruiting classes that made up our program were classes that I recruited as the head coach, right? So I think that's a great judge of any head coach is when they're able to have their recruiting classes in and their roster put together. Um, and we had a couple of really special seasons there. I mean, obviously, when you look back at some of the statistics there, we were very opportunistic on defense. We had some great players that we developed in their program. We had a great running game. I think our running back won MVP of the league one of those years there. So we were able to obviously score a lot of points and play really really sound football. And I think those are the things that you take pride in. As a head coach, you want your team to be respected from the standpoint like, hey, they play hard and they're prepared, and they don't shoot themselves in the foot. So I think that was probably the most special part of that 2019 season. It was like the first opportunity for me as a head coach to have all four recruiting classes within my program for that season.
Yeah. So when it comes to coaching in general, hopefully this is not a tricky question for you, but if you could break it down for me, what are three of the most important things that head coaches, whether it be football or any sport, need to do for their teams, whether it's on or off the field? What are like the three most important things that you have to do to get your team ready, not just for games, but for anything else that they're doing off the field?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this will probably won't be in any particular order, but as soon as you asked that question, there was a couple of things that really just popped off to me. I think one, I think a really big part of this, especially college athletics today, is it can't be a transactional football centric relationship that coaches have with their student athletes. I think the thing I've always appreciated about being at a place like Stonehill is that it's a great community, right? And I think it's our responsibility as coaches for us to make sure our programs match that sense of community, and to make sure that at the end of the day, I only get to spend 2 hours or 2.5 hours, whatever it is, on the turf, with our players. Our relationship has to go beyond football. They need to trust the messenger before they believe the message, right? And I think so that's first and foremost. And I think today in today's day and age, as with the transfer portal and all that other craziness, that's harder now than ever, right? Because you don't have guys that are in your program for 4 or 5 years. That's almost more of a rarity now. So I think that's first. That's definitely one that comes to mind. I think another huge piece is there's a lot of distractions for our student athletes today, on and off the field, right? Controllable and uncontrollable. So I think the most important thing for us as coaches in relationship to that is we have to be really clear and concise in terms of what our expectations are. Something that I talk to our staff and obviously our student athletes about all the time is that it's my job as the head coach to show you where the goalposts are and to eliminate the gray area in your lives, so that you can take ownership and take control, right? So for us, we have a culture here at Stonehill where for the football team we define it as discipline, intellect, and grit. And the first prong of that is discipline is doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And I don't think our guys can be expected to do that if I haven't done a great job of laying out what those expectations are. And then I've got to hold myself to it, hold our staff to it, and hold our players to it. Because, like I said earlier, if you're moving the goalposts on them, it's really hard to make that kick, right? So, we have to do a great job of making sure our guys know exactly what's expected of them, where they got to be, what they got to be doing, when they got to be there, what they got to be wearing when they're there, all of those things, um, just to eliminate the gray for the guys. And then I think the last part probably has to tie into like your approach to the guys, right? In terms of I think athletes today, student athletes today, um, you know, are more invested in what they're doing when they understand the big picture. And like I said earlier, they feel invested in what you're doing and how you're doing. So you have to have a plan for everything for your student athletes and be able to communicate that to them in terms of like, hey, this is how we're going to use you in our offense or our defensive schemes, right? This is how we're going to develop you over the 4 or 5 years that you're hopefully within our program, right? And you need to set those benchmarks. You need to get feedback from them and make sure that they're involved in the process so that they want to stay involved in that process and they're invested in their own development. So I think those are probably just off the cuff, probably the three most important things that I can identify that are probably more specific to like today's student athlete. Because there's just so much more that goes into it now than even 5 years ago or even 10 years ago when I became a head coach.
Yeah. So this will be a good segue into this next question, and this has everything to do for a game day preparation. So basically, obviously, you guys, Stonehill, you compete on the FCS level
Mhm.
of football. Uh, but when it comes to non-conference, your non-conference schedule, how do you mentally prepare for non-conference games, whether it's against another FCS opponent or, in this case, against an FBS opponent? What goes into the mental preparation of these games?
Yeah, I would like to think that the approach doesn't change. I think, in football, you play so few contests compared to other sports, right? Like baseball is going to play 35 or 40 games, basketball, likewise, right? So, from a football standpoint, we do everything that we do for 12 Saturdays, and then hopefully you get to play a few extra. But I think from that standpoint, you have to approach every game like it's, every game's got to be the biggest game of the season, right? That's got to be your mindset because if I firmly believe that your perspective, like what your thought process is of what you're doing, affects how you do what you do. So the unique part about that this year is, to the point you just made, Steven, is like this is our first time playing any FBS opponents, right? So with Ohio and UMass on the schedule, with two MAC schools, on the schedule, I think the challenge for me and our coaching staff, and obviously for our student athletes, is to not change that approach, And I think, there's obviously, making sure there's challenges that come with that. Like Ohio, for example, is a tremendous program with a lot of success, and that's going to be a really tough football game for us. Um, for us to approach that game the same way that we approach a conference game is going to be a challenge. But I think, at the end of the day, you focus on the process and the preparation that has to go in week to week. And that's we want our guys to always get lost in that process because if you're results driven and you're worried about the result of the game versus Ohio or UMass or whoever that we play in or out of conference, it's really hard to achieve the results that you want to get, So I think the most important thing is that we approach every game the same way, to your point, and we try to get lost, in that process.
Yeah. And I bring up this question because, of course, on September 26th, you guys, Stonehill, will be visiting Athens, Ohio, to play my Ohio Bobcats. And I do wish you guys well. Uh, and it's like, in my case, I root for the Ohio Bobcats, and any challenge that we can get, whether it's from an FCS opponent or another FBS opponent, we welcome all comers. We welcome all challengers.
Mhm.
And sometimes it can be tricky with scheduling. So I do look forward to this game, by the way. And you guys are more than welcome to just enjoy the experience up in Athens, Ohio. I really wish you guys well when it comes to that. So,
Yeah. Look forward to it.
yeah. So let's see. So this has everything to do. This next question has everything to do with uh, moving up levels from Division II to Division I FCS, as you mentioned earlier in this interview, from the Northeast 10 conference to the NEC Northeast Conference. That happened in 2022, I believe. Could you take me through that process? What was that process like? What were you hearing leading up to that shift from Division II to Division I? And what are your thoughts? Second part of this question: what are your thoughts on, in general, conference realignment and how it's affecting everything, even on FCS level?
Yeah. So yeah, to go back to 2022 to the first part of your question, um, there really wasn't a lot of dialogue in the build up to it from a staff perspective. I think it was probably more, in the at the president's level, at the athletic director's level. I think the first conversation that I might have had with regards to, you know, level of play or FCS Division II, how comparable that is, probably in December, um, after that football season, after the 2021 season, and it kind of got me thinking like, okay, well, where there's some smoke, maybe there's some fire there. And then obviously, like a month later, we had an internal meeting, like a department meeting with the athletic department in January when we started the spring semester. Like, hey, this is something that we've been investigating as a school and researching on for 3 or 4 years now. And so that, when you hear that, you're like, okay, this isn't something that we just decided overnight to do. Like, obviously, they have a lot of research put into this, from a feasibility standpoint. Is this something we can afford to do? Is this something that makes sense geographically? Is this something that, is going to help Stonehill in the future? And I think the formal announcement ended up getting made in April, because obviously at that point you want to, um, you know, do your due diligence in terms of finding your league and getting an invitation, and you want to have a landing spot if you're going to make a move like that and an investment like that. So it worked out well with the NEC. Obviously, there was a lot of schools geographically that made sense. I'll be honest, from a football perspective, it helps tremendously from an out of conference standpoint. I remember being Division II, when we were, like you mentioned, the NE10, we were the only Division II conference in New England, right? So for us to play out of conference, we were landlocked. You had to go south, you had to go to the PSAC, right? And hopefully you were getting a PSAC East team, because those were going to be significantly closer. Your budgets are very different. So now, like, being in the Northeast, being in New England, being FCS or Division I mean, there's 5 FCS football conferences in the Northeast in our backyard. So, we're playing, 5 out of conference games this year. So that wouldn't have been feasible if we were Division II. And you're seeing a number of those teams change for that reason. I think a big reason why we had made that decision internally at Stonehill was, in the Northeast, there's fewer and fewer high school graduates that are coming down the pipeline. So, to help, really separate your school from the competition, you have to find things that make you unique in the marketplace, right? And I think what Stonehill realized, we were competing for students in the admissions process with schools that we weren't competing against athletically. So, for us geographically, we're competing with Holy Cross, UMass, Providence College, so there's a lot of great academic schools up our way, but we weren't playing any of those schools, So now, for us to travel out to Athens, Ohio, and play Ohio University, that helps keep Stonehill on the map, and it's a great opportunity for us from a marketing perspective, obviously from an athletic perspective. So when you see things like that, and then you have like our women's lacrosse team who won our conference championship and went to the NCAAs this past year. Our women's ice hockey team went to the NCAAs in our first year, Division I. That stuff is really cool, and that's kind of pointing to like why we did what we did. So I hope that kind of answers the first part of your question. What was the second part, Steve?
The second part was, what are your general thoughts on conference realignment,
Oh
and
yeah,
how do you think it affects everyone, especially on the FCS level?
yeah. I mean, from a big picture, like I'm 40 years old, so growing up like in New Jersey, like the Big East was awesome, right? You had those big. So I think from an FBS perspective, it's definitely, yeah, it definitely is kind of like weaken just the geographical product, right? Like having those schools that were bordering each other, playing each other in conference every year. You don't really have that anymore in some of those bigger, FBS conferences, right? I think the MAC still does, which is nice, right? But you look at some of those bigger schools, and you've got, a Big Ten school out in California, or an SEC school in Texas or wherever. It just kind of like, it just kind of changes things, So from an FCS standpoint, I think it's really interesting. I think there's going to be more from an FCS standpoint coming down the pipe here in the next 2, 3, 4 years. I think from an FCS football, the unique part is that basketball still drives that in a huge way because there's no FCS basketball. Everybody's Division I for basketball, right? So you're seeing the unfortunate thing of some teams making basketball related decisions and then kind of hanging their football team into limbo in terms of what conference they're going to be playing in, if they're going to be independent or playing in a conference that doesn't geographically make sense. And you've seen some teams in the Northeast and New England especially do that. Fortunately, we have not done that, and I don't think that's something that we would ever do. But yeah, it's really interesting the way basketball from an FCS standpoint has affected some of the FCS football programs.
Yeah. So this next question is more of a fun question, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on this show. Stonehill College in general. Uh, Basically, what makes Stonehill College special? You can go wherever you want with this, Eli. Uh, Take me through it. What's the campus like at Stonehill? What is the environment like in Easton, Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Because obviously I've never been there, and I just like to get a broader picture about what's going on over there.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you're always welcome to come visit. I don't think your Ohio Bobcats will be returning the trip. So if you do come, it's going to be a solo trip on your part. But yeah, Easton is a very suburban area. We're located about 20 miles south of Boston. We're in a really great kind of triangle for entertainment and activity. I mean, like I said, Boston is 20 minutes, 20 miles north of us. Providence, Rhode Island is probably a 35-45 minute drive south of us. And it's probably like 35-minute drive to get to the beaches on Cape Cod. And then Gillette, where the Patriots play, their stadium is like 15 minutes from campus. So there's a lot that's kind of located, all within arm's reach of our campus. We have a beautiful 400-acre campus, very green, a lot of it's not built into the town or the city or anything like that. We're not we're a smaller school. We're a private liberal arts school. We have just under 3,000 students undergrad. So for us, like I said earlier, it's a very community based type atmosphere. It's a high academic school. Our typical recruiting wise, like from a football standpoint, we're looking for a 3.0 GPA and up. So for us, it's important that we recruit to the academic standards and the profile of our school. And we want football to be an awesome part of their experience at Stonehill. Obviously, it's not going to completely define their experience because they're going to get a great, meaningful degree that sets them up for life after college here. So that's really what we're about and what we hang our hat on. And I think that we've done a great job of surrounding ourselves with awesome student athletes that play the game at a high level, but also want to get that type of education, that type of academic experience. They want to be in a classroom setting, not a lecture hall setting. They want to build relationships with people. And for a lot of our guys, it's a big fish in a small pond type atmosphere. And I think it empowers them to utilize those relationships and, understand how to take advantage of resources that are available to them. So one kind of cool thing about Stonehill, and you'll see it, on that Saturday when we come out to play Ohio, the campus itself sits on the former property of the Ames family. So I don't know if you saw this in your research, but the Ames family made their family fortune by inventing the D grip on the top of the shovel. So we have a shovel museum on campus. We have a class shovel every year that the senior class president presents to our president. We have a team shovel that we carry around with us everywhere we go. It's a kind of a physical representation of our culture of discipline, intellect, and grit. Dig. So you'll see a lot of keep digging and dig, and that's kind of plastered everywhere on our gear and apparel and everything. And like I said, one of our captains will run out of that tunnel in September in Ohio with a shovel in their hands. So that's just something that's kind of unique to us, and a wink at the history of Stonehill College in Easton, Massachusetts. Kevin?
So, um, yeah, so the thing about the shovel, glad you mentioned that. In my spare time, like I do gardening for my family when I'm not doing anything podcast related.
Mhm.
So it kind of made me smile when you mentioned shovels because I do digging all the time. I dig
Yeah.
up plants, I plant new trees, I do everything for my mother, and she would testify of that. So it just put a smile on my face when you mentioned shovels, Eli, because I could totally relate to how to use a shovel. So, a little fun fact there.
Yeah.
So, anyway, um, now when it comes to next question here, when it comes to coaching, um, what are like, I want to say requirements, but what are like the most essential things that someone needs in order to get into coaching, whether it's football or any sport? What are some of the things, in your opinion, Eli Gardner, that someone needs to get into coaching?
Yeah, I think a huge trait of any successful coach is there's got to be a high level of selflessness, and I think that's why you see it's not always the best players that make the best coaches, because the best players are not always selfless. There's an element of that, but there's also, I think some of the best athletes around have almost like a maniacal level of self improvement, where they're very focused on what they need to do and getting themselves to the top level. And then you see like the elite ones are able to bring others with them, right? As a coach, you never step across the line or onto the court, right, or onto the field. So you have to have an appreciation for what you're asking your athletes to do, and it has to be like their success has to be the most important thing to you. And that's what I'm getting at with that level of selflessness. I think all great coaches are great teachers. They find ways to connect with their student athletes. They find ways to communicate with them. They find ways to teach them, right? Because everybody has a different learning method, right? And so we've tried to develop our own, teaching method, in terms of, some guys learn through writing things down or seeing it on the playbook. Some guys learn by watching film. Some guys need to do it in a walkthrough. Some guys need to mess it up a couple times before they get it right. And it's our job as coaches to make sure we're hitting all of those guys. And you have to, get to know your student athletes and then figure out what makes them tick, what motivates them, so that you can hit those pressure points, in a good way. And I think when you build those relationships, when you invest in them, it allows you to have difficult conversations when you need to. I think, to be a really good coach at a high level, you can't shy away from conflict. There's going to be good conflict. There's going to be bad conflict. But all of it is valuable conflict at the end of the day. Because we're just trying to, inevitably build a callus in our student athletes so that they, can overcome adversity. They can perform under pressure, and they can execute when they get called upon. So I think you definitely have to be selfless. I think you have to be a great, teacher, and you have to be a great communicator. You have to find ways to connect the dots with your student athletes, and they need to see that and feel that. So, none of that has anything to do with X's and O's. X's and O's are a learned trait. I can teach anybody a blitz package or a coverage. Okay, I can't teach people to, to invest in young men, to communicate with them. It's a lot easier for me to teach somebody X's and O's than make somebody a good person who values, relationships and wants others to be successful and to take all the credit. So that's, to me, that's more important than anything else.
Yeah. So, one last question before we start wrapping this up. Uh, this is again another fun question here. The Stonehill Skyhawks, the name. Uh, what is the backstory behind that? Because there's always a backstory behind how a college gets to name their team.
Yeah.
Uh, what is it? What was the backstory behind that? How did you guys come up with the name Skyhawks? Is there anything interesting with that backstory?
Yeah, so a lot of controversy with our alums, because back in the day, Stonehill College was the known as the Chieftains, was our original mascot,
Okay.
and it was, I'm not sure the year. you probably look it up. I think it was the early 2000s where they decided they were going to change the mascot, and they actually did. Part of that process was they did a vote within the school, and the two options were the Skyhawks and the Shovel Makers. And the rumor is that the Shovel Makers won the popular vote, but they actually didn't go with that, obviously. So, from what I understand, a Skyhawk is a fighter plane that was flown by one of the Ames gentlemen in, I believe, World War II. So that would be the historical reference. Obviously, the Ames family used to own the plot of land that Stonehill now sits on. So when you look up Stonehill College, one of the first buildings that always pops up is Donahue Hall, which is a big kind of mansion-looking building on top of the hill. That was the Ames family summer home in the early 1900s. So they actually lived on that property, and now that's where our president's offices are and admissions offices are, and it's kind of the centerpiece of campus. So, the Skyhawk, the historical reference is to a World War II fighter plane.
Yeah, it's always interesting to find out what is the backstory behind a name for a team. I could go on and on about the Ohio Bobcats, how they started out, well, the 1800s, but we'd be here forever. So, but yeah, this is part of what we do here at Stephen Interviews You, is that we find out the story behind a college or a person such as yourself with coaching. And this interview has been just really wonderful, Eli. I got to know more about Stonehill College than I ever had leading up to this. So, with that, Coach Eli Gardner, thank you so much for being on my show, for being my guest. Um, and thank you so much for just telling the story of Stonehill College, because I really do appreciate it. I really do have a a great respect for those that can tell the story the way that you guys can. So thank you so much, Eli. Are there any final thoughts before we go?
No, Stephen, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate your kind words. It was great to get to speak with you. And I know that you'll be wearing green that weekend in September, but don't worry. You can wear a little purple in some of those other weekends and root for the Skyhawks after that.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Eli Gardner, head coach of the Stonehill Skyhawks. Like I said earlier, we welcome you to Athens, Ohio, for the game on September 26th. Hope you guys have fun there. And thank you guys for watching. This has been episode number 42 of Stephen Interviews You. We'll be back with more interview related content soon enough. Take care, guys.
Thanks.